Then good evening, everyone, and welcome to this conversation with Gordon McInally. So good evening, good morning, wherever you are. It's a delight to see everyone here. We have Rotarians registered from 25 countries from all over the world, and a warm welcome to you all. This will last no more than 1 hour, and we will answer all questions raised. We might answer some of the questions after. We'll see how the time goes. We'll certainly aim to get as much done as we can. If you want to pose a question, please use the Q&A on the Q&A button, and we'll get to as many of that as we can in this hour. And we'll also pick up the questions that were raised when you registered. So I'm really looking forward to this. And it's my honour and privilege to welcome our speaker this evening, who needs little introduction, but it would be remiss if I didn't note this man born in Edinburgh and educated in Edinburgh and Dundee, a past Rotary GB&I, Great Britain and Ireland president, past president of Rotary International, chair of a 2018 RI convention. I know that's a significant amount of work. Not least past president of Rotary International, a trustee of the foundation, and has been selected as the chair of the foundation for 2027-2028. A warm welcome to Gordon McInally. And Gordon has offered to share some thoughts to begin with. So it gives me great pleasure to hand over to Gordon for a few minutes.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you so much, Ken, for first of all convening this evening's gathering, and also for that, I have to say, far too kind and far too generous introduction. I'm sure many of you have heard me say this before. When I hear myself being introduced in those terms, I can't wait to hear what I've got to say, and so let's crack on. I have to say, I still find it hard when I'm introduced as the past president of Rotary International. And again, many of you heard me say this before. I still find it hard to believe that I ever was president of Rotary International, which gives us a wonderful bond because I know that there will be many people on this call who also find it hard to believe I was ever the president of Rotary International. This evening's webinar is all about membership. It's about a little bit about public image, which I think are very, very closely linked. And I think we will develop that theme as the course of the evening goes on. But the first thing I'd like to say to everybody on this call is a quite simple but a very genuine thank you. I want to thank you for all the service that you give to Rotary. I'm very conscious, and I know that my successors are equally conscious, that work of Rotary isn't done by the president sitting in an office on the 18th floor of a tower block in Evanston, just outside of Chicago in the USA. The work of Rotary is done by every member all around the world. And that means that the work of Rotary is done by everybody from the 25 countries that is represented on this call this evening. And so I want to take this opportunity of saying thank you to all of you for everything that you do, however you do it. And I know some of you have been involved in Rotary for a long time. Some of you may have been involved in Rotary for a short time, but every contribution to this organization is valued. And so I am very grateful to you for what you have done. Membership has always been an important part of Rotary. We have to have members. If we didn't have members, we couldn't do the service. And even 20 years ago, when I was president of Rotary in Great Britain and Ireland, and even longer ago when I was district governor of what was then District 1020 in the south of Scotland, membership was important because we had to serve. And the needs of our world are increasing ever more. Every day we pick up our newspapers, or we open our tablets, or we switch on our television or our radio, and we hear of crises all around the world. And these crises filter down to requirements for service by an organisation like Rotary. And so I think the first thing when we talk about membership is to answer that question, why do we need members? It's not a numbers game. We're not looking to get members for the sake of it. We're looking to get members for the service that we are being asked to provide. It's an interesting fact that we are actually quite good at attracting membership. We worry about the fact that our numbers are at best stagnant and possibly falling, particularly in certain parts of the world. But we're actually quite good at attracting people to join Rotary. The challenge we have is keeping them in Rotary. And if you look at the global data, we lose something like 30% of our new members within the first 3 years of them joining. And maybe even more concerningly, we lose something like 10% within the first 12 months of them joining. And I think that's a question that we have to address, a question we have to face up to, and we have to accept that in many cases it's not their problem that they're leaving so soon. It is in actual fact our problem. We've talked for many years, ever since I joined Rotary, we've talked about the importance of mentoring our new members. And I think that is just as important today as it was when I joined Rotary 41 years ago. I think it's vital that we nurture our new members. And in fact, I often talk about the fact that we need to transform our members into Rotarians. Because I do believe, sincerely believe, that once you become a Rotarian, you will never leave this organisation. I was very lucky in my early days in the Rotary Club of South Queensferry to be taken under the wing of two members who sadly are now no longer with us. But each of those members, each of those Rotarians nurtured me. They took care of me. They encouraged me to be part of Rotary. They encouraged me to be part of wider Rotary beyond the club. And that's why I flipped from being a member of the Rotary Club of South Queensferry, who went along every week and enjoyed the company of my fellow members, to becoming a Rotarian who, frankly, will be there until I draw my last breath. And I think it's important. I'm a great gardener, and I know there are people on this call who have seen my garden, and I am a keen gardener. It might not look $1 million, but I am a keen gardener. And I think it's so important when we're working in a garden that if we put a new plant or a tree into the garden, that we nurture that tree. We make sure that tree or that plant has strong roots before we move on to plant more of the garden. And it's exactly the same with our new members in Rotary. We need to make sure that we nurture them, that we allow them to establish strong roots, that we speak with them, we find out what their passion is and how we can help them fulfill their passion when it comes to service. And then I think we will find that our membership will grow, because if we can close that back door where they are leaving, then we can ensure that the people who come in stay with us for the duration. I'm on record as saying that Rotary should exist everywhere in a style to suit everyone who wants to be a part of us. And that's why it is so important that our clubs are different. We need to have the traditional clubs. Some people call them heritage clubs. Some people call them legacy clubs. We need to have those clubs because those clubs can be successful and there are people who want to be part of those clubs. But we also need to have new styles of Rotary Club to meet the needs of the wider community. We're very lucky in the part of Scotland that I live to have a fairly newly established passport club, which is doing great work and is attracting members who would not want to be part of a formal club that meets at the same time every week in the same place at a certain day and for a meal and a speaker. They're meeting every month face to face, every month virtually online. But more importantly, they are serving all round this area and indeed the wider community. And so those passport clubs, I think, are a great way to grow Rotary in the future. We have e-clubs, and there are a number of successful e-clubs within Great Britain and Ireland and even wider around the world. We have cause-based clubs, which I think are a very interesting concept for going forward. And then, of course, within Great Britain and Ireland, because we are a pilot, we have a strong push on corporate membership, which I think is an important aspect. We have something called enterprise, which I'm going to be quite frank here. I've been a little bit disappointed in the number of enterprise members that we have attracted so far. I know it's important that we do things right, but it's also important that we do things, and we need to be ramping up that because I think that has great potential for bringing people into Rotary. And then, of course, we have direct membership, and I think direct membership is another membership channel that in some ways is still finding its way. And I look forward to seeing how direct membership grows in the years ahead. So that's why we need to have different styles to attract different people and different types of members to join us. We speak a lot about having younger members. And that's very true. We need to have younger members, otherwise we will all age out in time. But I think sometimes we become a little focused on attracting very young members. We need to attract members of all age groups across the whole spectrum. And if our average age, for example, is 60, and I know within these islands it's probably rather more than that, before we start attracting the 30-year-olds, we need to work on the 50-year-olds and the 40-year-olds so that the 30-year-olds are not joining a club that is old enough to be its father or it's the members that are old enough to be their fathers or their grandfathers. So that is my feeling about membership. I think it is so important that we grow Rotary. I think it is so important that we have members to fulfill the needs that are required. But as I said at the beginning, and I actually said to both Ken McLennan and also Phil Dyer, who is our AV guru this evening, I am not the expert on membership. I don't have the answers. The answers are out there in this room. And I look forward to this being a conversation for the next 45 minutes where we can all learn from each other and share and hopefully be able to find a way to turn the corner that we need to turn to ensure that Rotary exists in Britain and Ireland and all round the world well into the future to meet the needs of the world. So thank you very much, Ken, and I'm very happy now to move into the conversational aspect of this where we have a dialogue rather than a monologue.
That's fantastic, Gordon. Thank you very much for that inspiration that'll help us move forward. You made a very interesting comment about turning a member into a Rotarian there. Can you expand a little bit on that? What do you really mean in that?
Well, I can because I can tell you if somebody said to me, "When did you become a Rotarian?" It was not on the 9th of February 1984 when I was inducted into the Rotary Club of South Queensferry. That night I became a member of Rotary. I became a member of that Rotary Club. But it took some months and maybe even more than a year before I felt that I had become a Rotarian. And as I said, one of the reasons that that happened was that there were people in that club who were prepared to invest their time in me, whether they saw something in me that they thought was worth investing in, I don't know, but they saw something that they wanted to invest in me and help me learn more about Rotary, help me learn more about the opportunities that Rotary presented, help me learn more about what Rotary did and how Rotary did it. And we talked 40 years ago, it was called mentoring. We still call it mentoring, but I think it's so important if we get a new member that we look after them. I think sometimes we bring people in and then we just sit them in the corner and go looking for the next new member. We need to take care of them and find out what they are interested in and what they can do. I'm going to give you an example. The Rotary Club of Borderlands here in Scotland, the Passport Club that I spoke about earlier, they got a new member in who had an interest and an ability in organising golf tournaments. So for the first time this club, it's a new club, but for the first time they decided to organise a golf tournament, and they charged the new member, one of their newest members, with organising the golf tournament. He made a great success of it. And of course, in doing that, he felt that he was worthwhile to Rotary. He felt that he was useful to Rotary. He learned more about Rotary because of what he was organising it for and the conversations we had during the planning and on the day. And so I think we have to play to people's strengths and actually make sure that we, like I said, we need to help them fulfill their passion to serve, because that's often the reason they want to join, as well as the camaraderie that comes. And again, fellowship's a kind of old-fashioned word these days, but that friendship that comes from being part of a Rotary Club. I mean, the friendships I have in the South Queensferry Rotary Club, I will never be able to pay back what those friendships have brought to me.
I would certainly echo that, Gordon. We've got an interesting question from the Lebanon. How can Rotary better engage communities in the Arab region to build sustainable membership rooted in peace and development?
Well, that's a very important question, and in fact, you could in fact say, how can Rotary engage better with people everywhere to improve peace and development, because it's a need all over the world. We're very fortunate. We are relatively strong in the Arab world, and that's important because that's a significant part of our world, and we are working there, and I know that there are a great many strong clubs in that part of the world. We're very excited, and I don't think this is breaching any confidences. We're very excited that we will shortly extend into Saudi Arabia, which will be the first new Rotary country for some time, and we continue to look for opportunities. But of course, the way that we do that is on the ground. It's leading by example. It's our members who are already there, who are leading the charge to show that Rotary is there, to show what Rotary can do, to show that Rotary is an ethical organisation. It's an organisation that can be respected, and it's an organisation that can make the world a more peaceful place. And of course, that's not about stopping wars. And you've heard me speak before, Ken, about the fact that, peace is not walking into the war zones and saying, stop these wars.
No.
Peace is stopping wars from starting in the first place. As a dentist, I'm a great believer that prevention is better than cure. And anybody who's sat in the dentist chair for any length of time will know that it's better than cure. And it's important we prevent conflict from starting by educating people, by giving them clean water, by making sure their health care is adequate and they have economic opportunities.
Yeah. No, thanks for that. So, I mean, you talked a lot about community service. What inspired you to first get involved with Rotary and with community service?
Well, I think probably two things. I'm going to be selfish and say one of the things that I enjoyed getting involved with in Rotary right at the very beginning was the opportunity to meet people in a community that I hadn't lived in very long. Went to live in South Queensferry in 1980, and it was a chance to get to know people who, first of all, were not dentists, and that's one of the great things is, when you go to Rotary, you meet people from all sorts of areas and all sorts of professions and all sorts of backgrounds, and that was very good. But I think the other thing was that even at the age of 26, which I was when I joined Rotary, I wanted to do something for other people, and that's probably was something that was instilled in me by my parents. My father was not a Rotarian, and I often have said, sadly he died in 1985, but I often have said that he was probably one of the best Rotarians we never had, because he lived a Rotarian life, and that he was always looking to help people. If there was something needing doing, he would always be there to help. And so I guess it was that opportunity to realize that by belonging to something bigger, you can achieve more. How would a dentist living in South Queensferry in Scotland, working on the west side of Edinburgh, how would he be able to, give clean water to children in Africa? How would he be able to give heart operations to people in the Philippines? How would he be able to improve people's confidence in the local high school by running young musician competitions and young chef competitions. And by being part of that bigger being, it gives you that opportunity to do these things.
Yeah. You talked things on there about getting people engaged. Where have you seen, or what have you seen as best practices to keep members engaged? And quite often it's younger members we need to keep engaged because at the end of the day, I'm speaking for myself here. I'm today's person. I'm not tomorrow's person. But the young people, the young people are our tomorrow, aren't they? How can we engage them
They
and get
are,
them involved?
and I guess I'm rapidly becoming tomorrow's person as well. But they, I think it comes back to giving them a job. You know,
Yeah,
sometimes we bring people into Rotary clubs and we think, well, we'll give them a nice soft landing when they join, and we'll not ask them to do anything to begin with. But, you know, if you don't ask somebody to do something, they can very quickly drift to the periphery. And so we need to make sure, like I said earlier, that when we bring people in, we identify what turns them on, what is their particular interests, and then try and find a job for them that will allow that. We a very younger member joined the Rotary in South Queensferry, well, probably 3 or 4 years ago now, and she had a great aptitude for social media. And at that time, when she came in, she immediately took over the club's Facebook page and was running the club's Facebook page for a while. She's still a member, but she's now got a toddler to look after, so she's passed that on to somebody else. But that, I believe, engaged her and made her realize that she could contribute to Rotary. And I think we have to make that plain when we bring people in. We need to give them a job.
yeah. And I think it's important not to assume what they want to do. An example I have in my club, we had a teacher join us recently, and we asked them what they wanted to do, and they said, "I do not want to see kids. I've been teaching them for 30 years."
Yeah.
No reflect. So we've got to ask them what they want to do to go forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know,
Um,
we have information nights. I think we still have information nights for people to tell them a bit about Rotary before they join. But once they've joined, we need to have an information night to get information from them about what they want to do. And you're absolutely right. I think, you know, especially if something, it's like the minute you get a banker coming into the club, you think, oh, that's our next treasurer. But maybe it's not your next treasurer because they're doing that all the rest of the time, and or they have done that for many years, and so they want to find something else to do.
I think it's other thing I've seen is um, you give people a job. Will they do it the same as the rest of the people in the club? No, they won't. But it's not wrong. It's just different how they might do it.
Absolutely. Yeah,
And
and I
and
think that's the other thing is that you have to give people, you know, a bit of leeway and not be overly critical. It's very easy to be overly critical, and it's very easy for, you know, the people who are on this call are sufficiently motivated to be on this call. It's a Monday evening or it's a Monday sometime wherever you are in the world. You've given up an hour of your time. We're committed. And we've got to realize that not everybody in Rotary has that same level of commitment. And we have to accept that, and we have to realize that we play to whatever strengths they do have.
yeah. So so we have Phil Dyer in the background, who's our public image lead for Britain and Ireland. Maybe it's a question for him, but let's test and see. Maybe Phil will come on. Um, what should we at grassroots level do to promote Rotary and broaden and enhance our public image? What is Phil going to come on and join that one, or would you have a go at it first, Gordon?
No, no, I'm here. I'm here.
Oh, here we go.
I can hear you there. Um, just give us the last part of that question again, because I was busy pressing buttons.
What should we at grassroots level do to promote Rotary and broaden and enhance our public image?
Right. Well, anyone who's seen me speak over the last couple of three years knows that there's two legs to the stool for public image in my world, and wearing the right badge is a great idea. But telling people about what work we do in our communities, whether they're local around the corner or further afield, and telling the story of the work that we do is where the magic happens. because people are engaged by the story, and you need to tell your community what you're doing. Of course, strap a Rotary badge to it because we're proud of the work that we do. We're Rotarians, we're members of Rotary, and we like to wear the badge. We need to tell them that, but it's the work that we do that's makes the difference and differentiates us from other organisations. So just telling them, and if I could just expand upon that, it wants to prove the action. You need to tell them what you've done. You haven't raised any money. You've taken 20 children on an away day. You haven't raised the money. You've fed some hungry families. That's what you've done. The impact of what we do daily, and we do it daily, hourly across the globe. And we just need to tell everyone about that. So that's what I would say is tell your story. Wear the badge, tell your story.
It's interesting, if I can come in there, it's very interesting because those parts of the world where we are growing, those parts of the world where we are successful at the moment, are those parts of the world where our public image is at its best, where people know about Rotary, they want to be part of us. I think it's a saying, it's easier to sell something, it's easier to have somebody want to buy something than it is to sell something. And at the moment, when we don't tell people about what we do, we're out there selling Rotary. We're trying to beg people to join us. But if people once know what we're doing, and if people once know everything we achieve, then they will want to buy into Rotary. And that's what we're seeing in India. It's what we're seeing in places like the Philippines. It's what we're seeing in those areas of the world where Rotary is actually growing. But the other thing, just to reinforce what you said there, Phil, about the fact it's not about the numbers, it's not about the money, it is about the effect of what that will do. And again, coming back to this golf day that I was speaking about earlier being run by Rotary Borderlands, they raised money for Parkinson's research. Now, they raised a significant amount of money in monetary terms, but what they were able to tell people was just how many hours of research that they had been able to fund. And who's to say that one of those hours of research wouldn't be the hour that finally they found a cure for Parkinson's? And that's a much better message than simply talking about the fact we've raised £1,000, we've raised £5,000, we've raised £10,000. It's the impact of what we're doing, it's the outcome of what we're doing that is so important.
Yeah, and I've said to lots of people, we didn't raise £6,000 for shelter box. We've rehomed 10 families in desperate need, and that's the real story, isn't it?
100%. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and it kind of leads us on. We talked about the promotion there. Should Rotary, or how should Rotary promote itself nationally, internationally, to improve public awareness of the great things we do, and of course, and then enhance membership? Is there a campaign we should do at national level, international level, or is it club level?
I believe it comes from the club level because ultimately we've got 46,000 outlets around the world that can be promoting Rotary. Somebody asked me while I was president, why doesn't Rotary take a slot during the Super Bowl adverts and promote Rotary? Now, if you've got a spare 5 million, and that might be a low estimate, $5 million to put into a 30-second ad campaign during the Super Bowl, great. Please give us it and we can put an advert into the Super Bowl. But I think we've got better things to do with 5 million or more dollars. It is down to the individual units to promote the organization with the assistance of people like Phil and his successor, Irene Russell, who will be coming on board. This is how we can best promote it because the needs are different in every area as well, and the target audience is slightly different in every area as well. And so it has to come from the ground level.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. I think we've always been a club-based organisation, and that's that's the beauty. That's what we were attracted to in the first place. It was helping our local communities. And just touching on what Gordon said at the beginning, where he said turning members into Rotarians. I think when you start looking beyond the club wall, at the district wall and the national wall and zones, and then internationally, you see the impact that we have as an organisation, and that's when you get the bug and you become the Rotarian. To coin the phrase, I think changing from a member to a Rotarian. So, yeah, definitely.
There's an interesting question from Himanshu in the questions. How can we interest and engage new members to experience Rotary beyond the club? And I know the interest in that, and I'll come back to it, but maybe Gordon, you want to pick that one up?
But and that is a very interesting point that Himanshu makes, because I think the great thing about Rotary, and the thing I try and impress upon people, is that we have this unique selling point in that we are local and global all at the same time. There's any number of organizations out there that work locally. We've all got organizations in the areas that we live that work on a local level, on a community level, in the community that we live within. And there's lots of organizations out there that work globally, and only globally. But the great thing about Rotary is that we work locally and globally all at the same time. And I think, frankly, I think most people probably join Rotary to get involved locally. They want to give back to their communities to begin with. And so we have to recognize that. But then we have to also introduce the global opportunities that do exist. And of course, we're still working to eradicate polio. We're getting there with polio. We will eradicate polio. I'm under no illusions about that. We will eradicate polio. I've spoken to people who are far more medically qualified than I am, who assure me that it'll happen. Now that's just a question of time. But that's a wonderful example of the work that we do on a global level, but also on a global community level. Many parts of the world talk about international service as world community service. And that's a good way to describe it, because we're doing community service all around the world, and we can be part of that. Wherever we are in the world, we can make a difference in other parts of the world. Again, I know, but there's nothing better than examples, but the Rotary Club of South Queensferry have just been able to improve the facilities in a maternity hospital in Lilongwe, Malawi, that I visited while I was president. And this maternity hospital, the busiest maternity hospital in sub-Saharan Africa, with a phenomenally high neonatal death rate. They needed some assistance. And so there's a Rotary Club in Scotland, just outside of Edinburgh, has been able to make a difference for the mothers delivering babies in a hospital in Lilongwe in Malawi. And that's just one example of hundreds of thousands of examples that we could speak about where we work globally, but we're also working locally at the same time.
And I think the best example I use is, and she's sitting beside me, so I'm going to get embarrassed maybe, or she'll embarrass me later. My wife would not join Rotary. Mary would not join Rotary until she went to convention and she saw the big picture of what Rotary does and said, I want to join Rotary. So it's getting that knowledge, and maybe some of the first steps are into districts and going to district conference, perhaps.
Well, you're going to hear more by doing that for sure. You're going to learn more about the bigger picture because, I had the opportunity to be at your own district conference, Ken, just about a month ago, and heard some wonderful presentations from people like Jack McConnell, Lord McConnell, who was presenting on the work that he was doing in Africa. And you realise that Rotary is involved in all those different places.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to dive on to, I'm really conscious about your keenness in working with mental health, and how you see that perhaps moving forward. What could Rotary do, say, over the next 5 years, or maybe in 5 years' time? Where could we be on looking after mental health for people?
We are already doing a great deal on mental health, and I am so encouraged by what we're doing in the field of mental health. I have to say, many people will know that yes, mental health was a particular focus of mine as president, But what I did discover when I started drilling down into the whole topic was just how much we were already doing in mental
Mhm.
health. So I was saying on another webinar just last week, I don't feel that I unlocked the door to allow Rotary to move through into the field of mental health. I feel I was able to open a door that was already ajar, and Rotary came flooding through. I started just about fortnight or 3 weeks ago. I was gathering together some of the projects that we've been doing all around the world in the last couple of years. And when I started doing it, I thought I might find half a dozen projects or 10 projects if I was lucky. There was page after page after page. I think I've got 8 pages of A4 of projects that I've been able to find out about, and I'm sure there are a lot more. It was one of those things, I think it was timely when we started working in the mental health field. We were just really coming out of the pandemic and we recognized the challenges of the pandemic. We recognized that so many of the world's ills stem back to poor mental health. We only need to look at the shootings that take place in America, the knife crimes that take place in the UK, so many, the domestic violence, so much of this stems back to poor mental health. And so I think it's so important that we do work in that field, and I'd see no sign of it slowing. That's the great thing. I was so enthused that Stephanie Urchick, my successor, was so keen to continue that mental health focus. And I know that Francesco Arezzo and also Yinka Babaloa, the next two presidents, they're also, even in this month's Rotarian magazine that came out just yesterday or today, Francesco references the fact that mental health is an important part of what we do. And of course, within the club, we can help in that front as well, and we can have the conversations within the club and make sure that we're all in a good place ourselves. Because if we're in a good place, we can do a lot more. And it's so important that we have that safe space in our clubs that people can talk to each other about how they're feeling and remove that stigma about mental health. People always want to talk about their physical health. I think they want to talk about their physical health too much. If you ask somebody, how are you doing? And they've got a sore ankle or a sore shoulder, you're going to get told about it until you've heard more than enough. But I think we're still in a situation where people are less keen to talk about their mental health and the way they're actually feeling. We
Yeah.
need to change that.
Yeah,
And
I think that's a really good, sorry, Ken. I think that's a really good point that, we need to be, kind to ourselves, because if we're looking after ourselves as Rotary members and Rotarians, and we're aware of what issues are going on within the club, we can do more in our community, because if we're looking after each other, we can look after others within the community. It sort of, it starts at home, and we need to make sure that our new members have got a job. We've talked about that already, and they've got a job that they want to do. Like Gordon says, bringing in the retired banker to be the future treasurer might not be what he wants to do, because he wants to help with a food packing project or something like that. The last thing he wants to get involved with, and that can bring pressures on membership, but also pressures on mental health and well-being as well. And we're sort of duty bound as Rotarians to look after our own before we look after others, because we can do that better when we're well.
yeah, I think that that's really interesting. I think there's also a piece about, are we prepared to ask somebody if they're okay?
Hmm.
And that caring part of it.
And it goes beyond that. And again, this is one of those Gordon McInally strap lines that seems to have gone into Rotary parlance. It's not about how are you, it's about how are you really.
Yes.
But if we're going to ask the question, how are you really, we also have to be prepared to listen to the answer. And I think that's a very important thing as well. It's if somebody is going to open up to you, you need to be ready to sit with them and receive what they're telling you and then support them. And that's a crucial part of the equation.
And that goes back to our mentoring and looking after our members. If somebody hasn't appeared for a few times, are you okay? Is there anything we can do? There's something about that caring for our whole team, isn't it?
And the better we get to know each other, well, two things. The better we get to know each other, the better we're going to work together. But the better we get to know each other, the better we get to be able to sense if things aren't quite right.
Yeah.
You know, as within a family, if things aren't quite right within a family, you get a sense that things aren't quite right without necessarily the verbal communication going on. And so that's why it's important. And that all then comes down to the club and the club experience and the fact that we recognize we have hard data to show that the club experience is the most important thing to people and that, you know, a happy club's a successful club.
Yeah. Um, just staying on the mental health for a second. Somebody asked a question, could mental health related projects be considered as a new area of focus, perhaps?
I wish,
Or is it covered already in other
I
things?
wish, well, I wish I had a pound for every time I'd been, or a dollar for every time I'd been asked that particular question. That's probably the second most popular question after what are we going to do after polio. But as far as mental health is concerned, obviously, from a personal point of view, nothing would give me greater pleasure than to see mental health established as an area of focus. I have to say, at the moment, I know a lot of the trustees of the foundation are of a similar mind, but I also have to say that we are not looking to expand the 7 areas of focus to 8. And perhaps part of the reason for that is the fact that at the moment, virtually any mental health initiative, any mental health project could be put into one of the 7 areas of focus, should you be wanting to establish a global grant to support a specific initiative. You know, we've got young people who are suffering from poor mental health because of climate change and that sort of eco-anxiety, I think is the term that's being used. So we could have a project that would slot into the environment area of focus. We've got women that are suffering from postnatal depression. Well, that would fit into the mothers and child in area of focus. So I think, and peace. I mean, what better area of focus than peace could we fit a mental health project into? So I wouldn't be too hung up on it becoming an area of focus, but I would certainly encourage people who have an initiative that may be able to fit into an existing area of focus to consider getting global grant funding to help fund the projects.
Yeah. Cressida in the comments has said, that we're making great strides in her district about setting up memory cafes for people in the community with dementia, for example. Great idea to move
Wonderful
things.
idea. Yep.
Fantastic.
Yes, and I think that's the other thing to recognize is that, we talk about mental health, we talk about mental health and well-being. And I think, understandably, we're often drawn to the sort of younger end of the spectrum, but there's
Mhm.
that older end of the spectrum as well, that the people who are perhaps suffering from dementia or just people who are suffering from loneliness, and that's having an effect on their
Yeah.
general well-being. Phil and I did a webinar last week with some friends in France and the Fellowship of Rugby Fans, and we got to talking about the fact that there's opportunities there, and I did an interview with Dave King, the editor of the magazine, last week, and we were talking with somebody from Bromley Football Club, and their trust runs a drop-in centre every Thursday morning. And it's not for people with dementia, it's just for people who might be living alone and are a bit lonely. They come in and they talk things through and moan about the football results and celebrate the fact Scotland are going to the World Cup and makes them feel better.
Although it was nerve-wracking in 90 minutes plus one, 90 minutes plus two. You lead us on very nicely there to talk. You talked about the fellowships and the action groups. Are there opportunities in there for membership or fellowship or service beyond club level as well?
Well, I think there are, and many of the action groups are actively involved in global grant projects all over the world. I think the other thing, in many ways, the fellowships in particular, but both the fellowships and the action groups are the original cause-based clubs. We've got
Yes.
this wonderful new concept that we talk about, the cause-based clubs, but in many ways, these fellowships and action groups are the original cause-based clubs and have been around for a long time. I think they're also a wonderful retention tool because
Yes.
I think people who are involved in the fellowships, be it, the Rugby Fan Fellowship or the Fellowship of Whiskey Drinkers or the Beer Drinkers or whatever kind of fellowship it is, that brings people together. And if you're together like that, you're going to stay longer than if you were perhaps a lone voice in the wilderness of a Rotary club.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The next
that's
one
a
up,
great point there, and I think that's another one to include part of the action plan. You know, it expands your own personal reach into Rotary elsewhere. So if you are a whiskey drinker, joining the Fellowship of Whiskey Drinkers, not only are you operating at a club level, but you're operating then at a fellowship level, but internationally with friends and colleagues that spurn new conversations, that bring about more projects, that bring about more doing good in the world. And I think it just expands your reach. So I think being a member of a fellowship or an action group is massively important to the way that you operate as a Rotarian.
And I think it's important to recognise that other beverages are available.
Yeah,
really.
I'm sure there's a gin and a rum one somewhere.
There is.
There is.
But
Now,
there's also a tea drinkers fellowship. So let's not get
Yeah,
too hung up on the
no, no.
alcohol side of things.
they'll wonder what we're doing in Scotland and Britain and Ireland. um, Here's a thing looking forward quite a bit. How do you see Rotary International in the next 100 years? Global or local?
I think we will still be global. I think in the next 100 years, that's a long way out. But I think in the next, even in the next 10 or 20 years, I think we will see a less centralized Rotary in terms of we're already experimenting with the pilot that's going on in Britain and Ireland and the pilot that's going on in Australia and New Zealand. I think we need to look at decentralizing a bit. That's not to say that we need to completely close down the operations in North America. But I think the idea of this concept of, not so much regionalization as regional adaptability, so that we recognize that, the cultures are different all around the world. And so perhaps the way that we need to administer Rotary would be different. But we need to also bear in mind that our core values are the same, whether you come from North America, South America, Africa, Europe, Asia, wherever. That our core value has to remain the same, because that is what makes Rotary different from other organisations. Is the fact that we do have a very strong ethical background. We do have this thing called the four-way test, which is, I would stress, a mirror, not a window. It's something for us to judge ourselves on, not to judge other people on. But I think there is a strong future for. I think the needs for Rotary are not going to go away. The needs are only going to ever increase. And I think like I said at the very beginning, we need to make sure that we're available everywhere in a style to suit everyone that wants to be part of us. And we all recognize that, yes, it'll look very different to how it looked even 40 years ago when I joined. I think back to my early days in Rotary and the fact that I can still remember being torn off a strip for turning up one night without a tie on, and being told that I was improperly dressed, and the sheer formality that took place at that time. But it was of its time, and things move on. Business changes, and Rotary changes as well.
Yeah. And that's part of our ability to adapt, I guess, in the action plan, is
Has
it
to
not?
be.
Yeah. Here's a slightly different one. In many cases, a lot of the services we provide 10 years ago are now being provided by others, particularly in Britain and Ireland. And the community support is being covered by others. In 5 years' time, how do you see Rotary supporting communities differently, either at club level and in the Rotarians themselves, perhaps?
So I think first of all, there will be a need for us to support at community level. We will never reach a point where everything is looked after by everybody else. I think there's no problem with the fact that many of the things we used to do are now being looked after by other people. Because in actual fact, that means we've done a good job. We've actually identified the need, and then somebody else has taken it over, allows us to identify more needs and to fulfill even more needs. Because there's never going to we're never going to run out of things to do, even at a local level. Again, coming back, it's all about examples. But I remember many years ago, and I think there's at least one member of South Queensferry Rotary Club on this call. Many years ago, we used to run a thing in our local high school. It was an evening out for the old people of the town. And we thought that what we were able to do was take all these poor people who were not poor financially, but unfortunate people who were on their own all the time, and bring them out for a night and give them a good night out. And it would be the one night in the year they were allowed to get out their house and go and do something. And the way we did it was we'd go round the week or 2 weeks before. Each person would be allocated half a dozen houses, and you'd go and invite these people out and say, "Look, we're here to give you the one night in the year out the house." So I went out to go round these 6 houses, and I think the first time I did it, four of the people weren't in because they were already out doing something else. And then the next time I went round, I got a couple more, and then eventually I got all six. And some of them said, "Oh, I'm not sure if I can manage that. I'll need to check my diary and see whether or not I'm available to come out that." And then you begin to think, well, is there really a need for something like that? So that's the other thing that you need to establish is the need for anything that you do. And don't assume that you know. It's a bit like assuming that you know what the member wants to do. Don't assume you know what your community needs. We need to speak to the people in the community and speak to the community leaders if they're not members of the club, and find out what their communities need. But I think, coming back to your original question, Ken, where will we be in 5 years in terms of serving locally? We will never run out of needs to serve locally. And there's never any need to either apologise or feel bad for the fact that some of the things we have done are now being done by other people. That's a sign of success. We've been the
Yes.
catalyst that has identified that there is a need for that, and then somebody comes along and we've handed it on to them.
I'm conscious where we are in time, and it would be remiss of me to tackle something on foundation, especially when we've got you here. Um, I, I keep asking myself, is this a chicken and egg? Does the foundation, because we do projects, gain members, or do we gain members so we can do projects?
I think we need to set aside the foundation. The foundation is, if you like, the engine that gives us the energy to do the projects. But we're always going to need members to do the projects. So there's the two sides to it. We need to fundraise for the foundation to give it the funds to allow us to make the grants that we make. But ultimately, we also need people on the ground to carry out those grants because,
Sure.
you know, we're very fortunate in Great Britain and Ireland that we do have in the main, good schooling. We do have clean water. We do have all these things. But in the parts of the world where we don't, it's the Rotarians on the ground that are doing the work. And so the first thing we need are the Rotarians, and everything else stems from that. But I think, and again, this is a subject for a whole different hour at least. I think we need to perhaps in this part of the world in particular get a better understanding of the foundation. And again, that comes back to what we were talking about earlier about not just talking about numbers. It's wonderful that last year our foundation worldwide raised $569 million. But it's what that money does that's important.
Indeed.
It's like the polio campaign. It's wonderful that every year we raise 150 million for polio thanks to the Gates Foundation matching, or in fact double up grant. We raise 50 and they chip in with 100 million. But it's the children that are walking today. It's the children that are living today. It's the reduction in impact on healthcare systems around the world that results from polio being eradicated that matters. I spoke at yours, I spoke at your conference, Ken. I didn't speak
Yeah.
about numbers. I spoke about the Kens and the Phils and the Gordons that I had met
Yeah.
while I was president that benefit from what the foundation does. And that's the most important thing of all.
And that comes back as well, Gordon, to we need to tell the story.
Yeah. 100%.
And it comes back to we need the public image, we need the stories out there.
And we've all got, and we've, sorry to cut in there, but we all have stories. I'm sure everybody on this call could give an example or more than one example of where they have seen Rotary in action, where they have seen Rotary turn things round for people. And you're right, we need to tell the stories and we need to make sure that we keep telling the stories because that's the way that we are going to thrive.
I'm conscious that the time's running on. I'm going to ask one final one for you and I don't know if this is an easy one or not. If you could do your term as RI president again, would you do anything different?
Again, that's a question I've been asked before, and in all honesty, I don't think I would. I was very lucky. I was president during a leap year, so I wasn't president for 365 days. I was president for 366 days, and in some ways, you think it would be nice to have had longer, but everything you do what you can do in the space available to you. I heard a previous president, in fact, it was Jennifer Jones, my predecessor, who described being president as being exhilarating and exhausting in equal measure. And I think that's a great way to describe the 12 months that you are president of Rotary International. It's exhilarating and exhausting, but for me, it wasn't in equal measure. The exhilaration was way, way, way more than the exhaustion. By the time you're done, you are done. You're ready for a rest in terms of physically. But just the opportunity to see what was done around the world and to actually meet the people that we help. And also, as I've said more than one occasion before, to be able to get out and thank people for what they do. Because we are a volunteer organisation, and I think it's so important that we thank people for what they do. Because there's a lot of people doing a lot of stuff every day, every minute of every day, if you consider the world in terms of time zones. And so it's so important. So no, I don't think there's a lot I would do differently. Um, I was very lucky. I had a full 18 months to prepare to be president. My friend Francesco Arezzo, the second dentist in history to be the president of Rotary International. We waited 120 years for the first one, and then the second one came along 2 years later. But Francesco had something like 18 days to prepare to be the president of Rotary International. And I was lucky I had a standard runway to become president. And but no, I don't think I would change a lot. No.
Gordon, our time is wearing. I'm going to start. I'm going to cover just what you started with. Thank you. We need to remember to say thank you to everybody. And one of the things I say, it's not thank you on behalf of Rotary. It's behalf of the millions of people around the world who benefit every day from what we do. So a huge thank you to your time tonight. I know your time is precious. I know you're asked to be everywhere, Gordon. And giving up your time tonight, we really appreciate it. And I would just add on, thank you to Phil, who's been working the tech behind the scenes. We thought we'd give him a little spot as well. And to everybody else that's made this session possible, but most importantly, everybody that's on the call, a huge thank you. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. So thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Good night.
All the best.
All right.